Hi everyone, welcome to How Can I Help My Child to Print? My name is Taunia Clouthier. I am an occupational therapist in the Renfrew County area. I've been within the school health system for the past 10 years. I've created functional therapy in 2018 to give myself a platform to create opportunities for learning for caregivers, teachers, parents, and give them some great educational background. And printing is one of my passions. So this is something that I'm excited to share with you guys. And also for functional therapy, I have the opportunity to provide some direct services to children as well. What I hopefully will have you guys learn today is developing an understanding of pre-printing strokes and how they may impact your child's print. Develop an understanding of what proper letter formation is and how to successfully encourage it. And become more familiar with pencil grasp strategies that can help promote a functional grasp. So teaching letter formations. What is your main focus with letters? Are you wanting your child to learn the full alphabet in capitals, full alphabet in lowercase, full alphabet in both options, or are you wanting just to focus on the name? Either options are great, and it's just something to be mindful as we go through this presentation. So pre-printing strokes are these precursors to forming letters. So they're the strokes and the shapes that you see right in front of you. It's typically not until a child can consistently copy the triangle, which is the hardest shape at the end there, that they'll have success with learning to print all of their letters. So this table just gives you a general idea of what ages a child may be when they develop these certain pre-printing skills. So imitate means that a child is able to look at a teacher, caregiver, the adult, whoever is doing it. They're going to look at them drawing the shape, and then they can copy after they look at that model. Whereas copying is you can place a sheet in front of them or have it already on, a chalkboard or a whiteboard, and they're able to look at it and then they can just copy it themselves. So this gives you a little bit of a baseline. You can appreciate that some children are going to be learning it faster and some children are going to be developing it slower, and that's okay. So what you guys can do at home is just see how many pre-printing strokes your child can make. If you model it for them, can they imitate it? If you have one shape in front of them, can they copy it? Or if you said the name of a shape, are they able to do it independently without any visual? So as they become more successful, they're going to be able to imitate, then copy it, and then do it independently. And again, remember, it is typically not until your child can consistently copy that triangle that they will have success with learning to print all of their letters. So you can appreciate that they might be able to print those letters that have the vertical and the horizontal or the circular strokes, but those angled letters like K or W or M, those might be challenging for them. How can you encourage it? So again, you're going to teach them, demonstrate how to draw them. You can use multi-sensory materials, such as drawing shapes in dry or wet bins. So you can have sand, you can have salt, you can have pasta noodles, beans, you can have shaving cream, pudding, whatever might be motivating or whatever you might have around in the house. You can get them to draw with their finger and draw the shape in there. I have a sample here. I used just a little container and I put sand in it. And then they can go ahead and draw with their finger. This is sand here, but I don't want to tip it all over. But they can go ahead and draw with their finger. Again, that's if they're at the copy stage. If they're at the imitation stage, feel free to have a little bit of a bigger bin, and then you can go ahead and do your triangle, and then they can do it beside you. Tracing shapes also is great. So I would just make sure that you already kind of have a solid shape made. So such as that. and then they can, take their crayons or markers, chalk, whatever format they're using, and just draw over top of it. Correct letter formation does matter. So sometimes we can get excited when a child forms a letter and not actually pay attention to how they are forming it. Letters that are not correctly formed can lead to future difficulties with legibility. So really and truly what that means is we're going to go over some of these letter formations and stroke sequences. So if they're not forming it right, maybe they're forming it from the bottom, maybe they're doing a stroke sequence, for an E, say a capital E, you have a big line. Maybe they're making their little line at the bottom first, and then they're making a big line from the bottom up, and then they're putting their top line on the top, and then they're putting their middle line in the middle. And so that stroke sequence is not necessarily the most efficient and effective way to draw that E. So we're going to talk about how you can develop the most effective, potentially most effective way to learn those letter formations. So when we're looking at actual letters, there's a lot of key components that a child has to learn and develop. So you can see there's 8 key components highlighted here: memory, orientation, start, and the sequence. So the child has to remember what the letter looks like. They have to know which direction the letter faces. They have to know where to start the letter. And again, that sequence we were just talking about, they have to understand how to sequence that letter correctly. That's our primary focus when learning our letter formations. Things such as sizing, spacing, placement on the line, and the control of your pencil on the paper, those are all secondary factors. They are very important also, but we want to try to focus on those primary factors first, develop those good, successful habits, and then it will lead us into better control and better ideas of how to space, place, and size our letters. So what is easier to learn, capitals or lowercase letters? Capitals. So if you're introducing capitals in specific order, you can look at your developmental principles. So you're going to introduce the capitals that have the horizontal, vertical lines first, the circular, the curves, and then introduce the angled ones later. Capital letters are easy. They're the first things, they are the first type of letters that young children recognize, and lowercase letters are more difficult. When children learn capitals first, they have lots of advantages. So they are going to avoid capital lowercase confusion. They learn lowercase letters more easily because basically the C, O, S, V, W, X, Y, and Z are the same as their capital letters, right? And then the J, K, T, and P, and U are very similar to their capital letters. So if taught correctly, children will be skilled with all their capitals and nearly half their lowercase. So why are capital letters easier? They all start at the top. They're all that same height. They all occupy that same vertical space, and they're easy to recognize and identify. So you can see that little comparison of A, B, D, G, P, and Q from the lowercase to the uppercase. The uppercase, they all look completely different. The lowercase, they're all circles with sticks, and it depends on what side the stick goes on, and that sometimes can lead to the confusions. And capitals are big, bold, and very familiar. So lowercase, they can start in 4 different places, depending on the letter. They're not the same size. They occupy 3 different vertical positions. You can have your small letters, your tall letters that go up and reach the sky per se, or your descending letters. And they're difficult to recognize because of those subtle differences. So it's also important to start your letters at the top. And why is that? We want to develop good starting habits for printing. It'll help better success. There are no capital or lowercase letters that start from the bottom. Children who start from the bottom are usually slower or sloppier. Starting from the top can encourage both speed and neatness. They say when you're pretty much like kinder to grade 2-3 area, you're learning to print, and then from grade 3-ish area on, you're printing to learn. That's when your legibility, if you're starting your letters from the bottom, that's when you can potentially see that sloppy effect. So vocabulary to teach each letter is also something to consider, and it is important. So I would just try to be consistent with whatever vocabulary that you are using to teach each letter with. I like the program Handwriting Without Tears. I am by no means affiliated with them. I just, over the past 10 years, I've just learned to really embrace and love the style and the approaches that Handwriting Without Tears provide. Handwriting Without Tears uses 4 different shapes to build all of your capital letters. And these shapes are big line, little line, big curve, and little curve. So these all 4 of these shapes, like I said, are going to take you through with a full alphabet for capital letters only. And for instance, I have an example here. So D, what a D would look like is you would have big line down, big curve. Okay, so that's the vocabulary that they introduce. That's the first level. Once they build that foundation of letter skills, they go into a little bit more detail, but still simple and basic descriptions. So it'd be big line down, frog jump up. So frog jump up means you're actually leaving the page. I'll show you actual examples later on in the presentation. So tips on teaching, again, you want to model the letter for them. So if you're sitting across from them, just remember that you have to, it might feel backwards to you, and that what they're seeing is the right direction for them. Say the vocabulary while modeling the letters. So big line down, frog jump up, big curve to the bottom. Have your child imitate you. So once you do it, have them do it. Ask them to say the vocabulary while making the letter. Even say, oh, can you tell me how to make the letter? You know, once they kind of get that vocabulary down, ask them to teach you how to do it, so that they're saying, okay, you need to do a big line down, frog jump up, big curve. And again, we're going to use solid lines versus dotted lines if you're tracing. And the reason just being that solid lines are just more clear and visually perceptual wise. It just makes sure that the child is tracing what they see. So if you have dot to dot, if you're using dotted lines, sometimes a child would basically connect the dots and not really focus on the letter formations themselves. They're just really just connecting dots, and they're not seeing like this is a big line and a big curve. Maybe they're just seeing dot to dot to dot to dot to dot. So I would just stick with solid lines. If you have, there's lots of resources that you might already have pre-made, and if they're dotted, then you can just use, you know, feel free to use a marker or whatever and just make it a solid line, and then just use a sheet that way. No matter the letter activity you are going to do with your child, just remember to be consistent on how you're teaching them by using these tips that we just mentioned. So letter play. So a multisensory approach to learning letters, great for children of all skill levels. So even if your child is not ready to use a pencil, this can be a very effective way to teach them the stroke patterns of the letters. First off, you can use multisensory, so you can have, again, a bin or tray filled with dry materials like the sand, salt, and beans, or wet materials like your whipped cream and pudding. You could even have tactile letters, you know, with like a little bit rough with sand, like maybe like those sandpaper letters, or using pipe cleaners. you know, like I have this, you can't really tell because you can't feel it, but this, it's raised a little bit up there, and it is like a little bit tactile for them to feel. And then you can also just draw in the air, and you can do door drawing. So you can just, you know, your door is basically this giant rectangle, and you can put a little happy face in the left corner, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. And then they can just, you know, have their arm and go big line down on their door and big curve. So there's lots of, you know, these are just some of the ways, you know, multisensory ways that you can use. There's lots. You can use your imagination. Just be consistent again with that vocabulary and how they're actually building their letters. Okay, so wood piece play is, that's where we come into these guys. So these are actual wood, and they're what we're going to use to build capital letters. You can make your own wood pieces with Handwriting Without Tears template, which they have available on their website. And I have like a resource page that I provided in this presentation that if you go there, you can find these templates. So you are going to build all capitals except the J and the U with the wood pieces, and you can follow a letter card template, or you can use a mat. So just quickly what that is. So this is usually what I do. So you can simply, so this is an actual product of Handwriting Without Tears, but you can simply, if you make your own wood pieces, and by the way, just simply using construction paper or cardstock and laminating it. Some people have used foam before for their own template when they trace the templates, and those are all great options. Again, it doesn't have to be wood. But once you make your templates, you can go ahead and draw out your own letters, right? Because you can just place your templates and make your pattern, your letter, and then take a marker and then just trace around, right? So then you made your own capital letter card. If you don't have access to these. So this is what I usually do when I'm doing letter formations. So I would say you would potentially again have your own set of these, and then your child would have also. So again, because we're imitating. So I would be, okay, this is our smiley face. Smiley faces are always on the top left-hand corner because they orientate us to the correct orientation of our letters, and they help prevent those reversals. So that's why we always have these, you'll see these smiley faces on all the products. So if you make your own, I would just, you know, make your own little, you know, dot here, star, smiley face, whatever. It doesn't have to be smiley face. It's just something that gives you direction to look there. So big line down, big curve. So once I put those together, I usually take my pinky or my index finger and trace it. Big line down, frog jump up, big curve to the bottom. And again, I should say that vocabulary can be found on that same link that I provided in the resource page on the Handwriting Without Tears website. All this vocabulary can be found there. Then I would get your child, once you did that, then I get your child to build it and then trace it. After that, you can take it down, and then they mention a blue mat. So what you can do, you can simply, this is their blue mat. It's simply a piece of foam with, again, your happy face. And you can make your own, right? You can just, and again, it doesn't have to be blue, but all I did was have a blue piece of paper, make my own smiley face, and laminate it. So after that, I would get them to try to draw it, try to make it on the blue mat. So you can make it first. Big line down, frog jump up, big curve to the bottom. Okay, so again, it's very repetitive, but you can understand. And then have your child do the same. So you can always have the letter card available for them right to look at visually so that they can see it while they're making their D, so they can see what it looks like. You know, the next challenge would be just to take away all the visuals and have them try to do it themselves, which means like you're not even modeling. So I would say that's like the different stages. First, I would have the letter card, your modeling imitated. Then I would have the blue mat and the visual there, plus you model and imitate. and then I would take away everything and then just ask them to say, can you make the letter D for me? And you don't have to do this all in one sitting. You can progress to that over different days or times. Like this is just a sample or an example of like what you can potentially find out there on the internet. For instance, like Pinterest, if you Google like letter play activities, they have lots of different opportunities and activities that you can go ahead and use. And I would just, do the same thing with them. So say this is the example, a little glary, of what it looks like. And I just laminated it. I put the little smiley face there. So that would just guide us a little bit better. And then you would take your car and potentially, I don't have one with me, but like if you had like a little Hot Wheels car, and then you would just be like big line down, and they can drive the car on it, right? This is the car in my hand, big line down, little line across the middle. So they can have fun driving their car on it. And you can be reiterating that vocabulary while they do it. So this is a little card with the handwriting without tears, but you can simply, you can find things like this again on Pinterest or whatever. Like there's a capital letter card there that I didn't fully finish cutting it out yet, but that's something that you can use too and find easily on the internet. And what you would do, so you would roll these little snakes out. So it's really up to you. And each snake would be big line, big curve, or little curve. And you can actually help the child make the snakes, and it could be fun, right? Like a fun little pre-activity to doing it, but to doing the letter formation. But if the snake becomes too distracting and you're just, now they're just playing with Play-Doh, and you potentially want them to work on a letter, then I would just pre-make these. Like you make them while your child is sitting there, or you make them beforehand so they're ready to go. And then simply big line down. Ooh, squished it. Frog jump up, big curve to the bottom. And once they place it on there, again, it's ideal if you can do one yourself and have them do it, or you can do it together. I usually, again, take my index finger and then I squish the snake, squish it down, big line down. Okay, so that you're kind of squishing it in and giving a little bit more tactile input. Big curve to the bottom. So that's kind of how I usually work with my dough. So another great activity is wet, dry, try. So I'll try to show you that right now. So this is how I would do it. So this is you doing this. You would draw the letter first, okay, and then present it to them. So big line down, frog jump up, big curve to the bottom. So ideally, you would have two of these, one for you and one for your child, okay? Then now you give them the chalkboard that already has the D on it, and we'll show you why. Because you're going to, I just have a sponge, just a simple little sponge that I had cut. There we go. And I'm just going to wet it. Okay, and then big line down, frog jump up, big curve to the bottom. Then you're going to take your dry sponge, big line down, frog jump up, big curve to the bottom. Okay, so that's wet, dry, and now you can see that you can see the letter D still, right? It's still there. So now when they're going to try, they kind of have that shape already there. If it's too wet, you can pick up the board and just kind of blow on it to make it dry a little bit. And then big line down, frog jump up, big curve to the bottom. So that is wet, dry, and try. So this is out of the multisensory activities. That one is a little bit more advanced for children who don't necessarily have the the skill development to hold a piece of chalk. Then potentially just don't do the try step. You can do the wet and the dry. but don't do the try. And maybe do the try once you're able to better hold that piece of chalk. Letter formation apps, just quickly. These are the ones that I've used and I've been successful with. Not that there aren't any other apps out there. Again, I'm not affiliated with these apps, but these are just ones that I'm familiar with. And I like because they give auditory, visual. They won't let you go backwards.
Big curve. Now, wet the letter with a sponge. Watch for the clue about where to start each stroke.
So you can see that there's that sponge there, and then that is what you have to use to draw your letter. And if you go off, oh, it's a little bit glary. If you go off the page, as you can see, it makes you try again until you do it correctly. And it goes through the wet, the dry, and the try.
Way to go! Now dry the letter with the towel.
So now you have the towel. I'm just going to do this a little bit faster.
Cool beans. Now try the letter.
And now it's a little bit glary. And now you have the chop, so now it's try.
You got it right.
So I can appreciate if that was just a little bit glary for you guys. But it's just basically everything that we just did together. And what sometimes happens is it's a little bit tricky to, you know, when it showed the wet sponge, the dry sponge, and the chalk, sometimes that's a little bit tricky to manipulate. So if you're finding, you know, your child doesn't necessarily have that development yet to grab something on the device to manipulate and move it, it can become frustrating. And then I would just stay away from it and just focus on those other letter play activities. And then letter school is basically very similar, but it's just a little bit more animated. So, oh. So you kind of have your, so this one does it for you. If I would have pressed down here, it wouldn't have let me go first. It would have directed you to do the top first. See, it won't let me go that way first, so I have to go down that way. It gives you that feedback. And it just gives a little bit more. And then it's going to let you try, and then it just, so it kind of disappears. See, it'll give you, what if you do it wrong a few times, it'll give you a little bit of guidance there. So, so that's kind of those two apps. Like I said, those are just, I'm familiar with them. It doesn't mean that there's not other great apps out there, but those are the ones that I've liked in the past. Okay, so quickly we're going to talk a little bit about teaching their name. Commonly asked questions that I do get is, can I teach my child to print their name in capitals? Yes, definitely, for sure. You can teach your child how to print their name using capitals. But what if they can't transition to a lowercase? That's okay. And it's a decision also, though, that has to be okay with yourself and your teacher too. It's a good discussion to have. Because yes, if I teach my child to print their name in capital letters, potentially they might not necessarily transition to the lowercase letters. And really, what does that mean? I think it's still functional to be in capital letters. Capital letters are very prevalent in our communities. Like a lot of signs you see, stop, exits, school buses, washrooms. There's so many, lots of things are printed in capitals. And it's functional. If they can print their name in capital and have a hard time printing it in lowercase, why not just stick with the capitals? But again, it is a decision that is based solely on what you guys feel comfortable with, what your skill level of your child is. And it's really, truly something that you can kind of ponder and be mindful of, you know, the differences of like teaching capital versus lowercase, or trying to teach both, which is definitely fine too. When first teaching, try to show their names around their house in capitals too, so they can get familiar with it. But you can also tell them that there are 2 different ways to print their name, right? So you can look at, the capital way and the lowercase way, so that they can recognize that that's their name in lowercase too, right? Sequencing. So one of the first stages of learning to print your name is you have to know the order of the name. So sequencing the letters of their name, basically spelling their name, is something that you can work on easily and readily if you kind of have time to prep some resources. So have loose letters to match the template. So you're going to start with a full name. You're going to start, for instance, you're going to start with your full. This is Jack, right? And then you're going to have, letters. It doesn't have to be, as put together as this. I had clothespins, and I have, here's a C, it's not the J, but you can appreciate, and that they can match it up, right? You don't have to have it. You can simply draw it on a piece of paper, cut little pieces of paper, cut the J and the A and the C and the K out in squares and have them placed on top. Easy. It's as easy as that. But what you'd want to do is, first, they're just working on that. When they can sequence it correctly, when they put the J and the A and the C and the K on the right spot, then you would remove the J and then have them put the A, the C, and the K, and they have to be like, oh, well, I guess the J goes there. Then remove 2 of them. So now they know where the C and the K goes, but they have to determine what goes first, the J or the A. And so you can appreciate that basically as you remove all of them, or the more you remove, the more that they have to remember what order and sequence their name is actually in. Yes, perfect. So demonstrating and imitation activity. So when you feel your child is ready to use a writing tool, you can use this kind of name strip. So you put your strip above your child's strip, and basically the strip is 2 thick lines, and you can have that little smiley face if you'd like, just to say that's the starting position. You are going to demonstrate each letter on your strip, and then you wait for your child to imitate you. So do it letter by letter. So this example is Ellen. So again, I would do E, and I would be saying big line down, I'll jump up, little line across the top, little line across the middle, little line across the bottom, and then have your child do the E. Next letter, L, big line down, little line across the bottom. So you go through that. I would still use that vocabulary through each letter, and then have your child imitate it. So when we're printing, we have to remember that we're also using a writing tool, right? So now we are focusing on crayons or markers or pencils and grasps, right? So I would say at first, crayons, and more crayons. They have a natural resistance to them, which helps actually build some strength in their hands and helps to promote an efficient pencil grasp with your preschoolers or any age. Just be mindful, I always say, is small tools for small hands. So if you have crayons, you can actually break your crayon into smaller pieces, 1 to 2 inches, so about that big. So that there's no, basically there's no room for them to hold it awkwardly, right? So you can even use a golf-size pencil or pencil crayons. You can even make the crayons, or sorry, the pencils even smaller, the 1 to 2 inches. Okay, again, because they're not going to be able to hold it like this if all they have to hold is something like this big. Sorry, this is just a big piece of chalk, but you can appreciate that maybe that would look like a crayon, right? They can't hold it really like that. So that's why that's my first go-to, is using small tools. So just quickly, these are kind of the different stages of pencil grasps. I'm not going to get too detailed into it, but first you're going to have, again, your whole hand grasp, right? So then your child, this is kind of what or any of those images, that might be what what your child's grasp looks like. They're going to transition into a transitional grasp. So this is actually putting their hands to the bottom, and manipulating your crayon or marker or pencil a little bit better. It's just that now the movement is coming from the arm. Their wrist might be off the table, so the movement be coming from their wrist or their arm. And so that's kind of a little bit more static. I guess it's a little bit more stiffer. And then the next progression would be your functional grasp. And then that's, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different grasps there. And now the movement is going to be coming from their fingertips. And that's kind of what more efficient and more functional grasp. That's kind of what we want. And you can see the tripod it says that dynamic tripod. That's kind of where you have your 2 fingers on your pencil, and then it rests on your middle finger, and then these guys are tucked in, and you have a nice big open space. Sorry, I'm trying to get back in and you have a nice big open space there, and your wrist is in kind of a neutral pattern. So that's like your go-to. That's like, I guess, deemed the gold star. That's what we usually teach as a tripod, but it's quite okay if they're doing a quadrupod, lateral tripod, lateral quadrupod, or adaptive tripod. All those are functional. And that being said, is that there's been a number of studies that basically say pencil grasp patterns don't actually have a significant influence on handwriting. So really and truly, the focus for pencil grasp is on the functional implications. So if a pencil grasp can become a problem only if a child has difficulty basically with their legibility, with their speed, or complains of a sore or tired hand. So if your child is doing an awkward grasp and they're able to print their letters and they're not sore, or everything seems to be going fine, then maybe talk to a teacher or an occupational therapist if you have that available to you, and determine maybe that's a functional grasp for them. Let's focus on something different. So pencil, a lot of times I get asked about pencil grips. So the potential benefits of a pencil grip. So it does provide that tactile feedback. It can reduce, we're talking about sore hands or fingers. It can reduce some of that pain or fatigue that you may be feeling, and it can guide our fingers to the proper placement on our pencils. However, there's always drawbacks to things. So it's very easy to put on wrong, some of the grips. They're easy to hold wrong. So once they're on, sometimes your child will end up fisting the pencil anyways, and they're not necessarily using the grip, right? A lot of the times they lose it. It's gone within the day. And so that's hard to kind of keep track of. They're consistently taking it on or off, and then when they're putting it back on, they're not putting it on right, and they're holding it wrong. And it does require supervision while using it. So basically, when you put a grip on, I wouldn't just have the mindset that like, oh, they're good, let's leave them alone and they can figure it out. No, you still have to talk about pencil, how to hold it, where to put their fingers. It still does take some supervision when using a pencil grip. And there's a great resource from FDMT that helps determine the correct grips. There's lots of pictures and kind of precautions in each. There's a nice big chart. So you can find that at that link. And again, that's in one of my resources that I provided. So if you do have any questions, we can go ahead and answer more now if there's any more that has come up. If I don't get to, to answer everyone's question, I do apologize, but, my contact information is here, and do feel free to reach out and connect with me. And this is meant for more of a general guide and understanding to printing. If you suspect your child has more difficulties and challenges in this area, I would potentially reach out to maybe an occupational therapist and get individual assessment and individualized strategies and activities and treatments for your child. Thank you very much. I hope you guys learned a little bit more about printing.